In my opinion, one of the best things an investor can do before buying into a company is go through the process of inversion. This process was talked about extensively by the late Charlie Munger. So before we apply it to Novo Nordisk, I will let him describe what exactly does this mean.
One of my favorite tricks is the inversion process. And I'll give you an example. When I was a meteorologist in World War II, they told me how to draw weather maps and predict the weather. But what I was actually doing is clearing pilots to take flights. And I just reversed the problem. I inverted. I said, suppose I wanted to kill a lot of pilots. What would be the easy way to do it? And I soon concluded that the only easy way to do it would be to get the planes into icing the planes couldn't handle, or to get the pilot to a place where he'd run out of fuel before he could safely land. So I made up my mind I was going to stay miles away from killing pilots by either icing or getting them into sucked-in conditions when they couldn't land. I think that helped me be a better meteorologist in World War II. I just reversed the problem. And if somebody hired me to fix India, I would immediately say, what could I do if I really wanted to hurt India? And I'd figure out all the things that could most easily hurt India, and then I'd figure out how to avoid them. Now, you'd say it's the same thing, it's just in reverse. But it works better to frequently to invert the problem.
So what Charlie Munger is discussing there again is the process that he coined as inversion. Basically, what this process is looking at the bear case around a company. How will those problems affect the company's top and bottom lines? And is the company positioning itself to avoid those problems? So with that, let's start with probably what is, in my opinion, the easiest problem for Novo Nordisk to avoid, and that is tariffs. Earlier this year, Trump announced that he was going to impose 100% tariffs on branded pharmaceutical drugs. And of course, on this news, there were a couple of caveats. The caveats were any business that was building or had built facilities within the United States to produce these drugs would be avoiding those tariffs. So it was clear that Novo Nordisk had a choice to make. They could either continue producing their products overseas and take a 100% hit when shipping them into the United States, or they would need to build within the United States to avoid these tariffs. Luckily, Novo Nordisk was already planning an expansion of their North Carolina facility, and this expansion was taking aim at producing their drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy within the United States. So this concern was addressed almost immediately. So that first concern is relatively straightforward. However, these next few you will have to determine on whether you think they are a major issue for Novo Nordisk or whether you think the company is just going through a rough patch and going to make it to the other side. The first one up here is Novo Nordisk has made a giant change to their board of directors as well as a change at their CEO position. And this has concerned a lot of investors because this change has taken place in a very short period of time. And not only has it been a very quick change, but the scale of change at the company has been significant. An Oxford University professor who's an expert in the theories of change made the following statement around this mix-up at the company. It's rare that a company of that scale to make that degree of a change that quickly. It's usually precipitated by some awful crisis which is throwing them off a cliff, but probably also a period when they were blind to what was going on underneath them. In other words, they were surprised by a sudden change, and it usually takes that to overthrow an existing power group in a company, especially if they've been in power for a long time. Basically, what this Oxford professor is saying is that how investors are going to perceive this significant of a change at Novo Nordisk is very negative. because clearly what it is indicating is there has been some shift in the market that Novo Nordisk has not been able to capitalize on, and that could have a major impact on their top and bottom line numbers. And that's why the company has chosen to make such clear and quick shifts in management. And even the new chairman of the board alluded to some of the reasons for these changes in a recent statement, saying, "I will enter the board with an intention of holding this position for a period of 2 to 3 years. My mandate is very clear. I have two important tasks together with the board. First, to support the CEO and the management in its transformation plans to regain its competitive leadership, and second, preparing the way for my successor." So, if we are implementing inversion on this problem, what would I do to make Novo Nordisk fail by implementing a new board of directors and a new CEO? Well, I would look for people who are coming from outside of the company and have very little experience in the pharmaceutical industry, trying to shift the whole way that Novo Nordisk does business. Personally, I do not see that as being the change that is made at Novo Nordisk. They brought in as chair the former CEO of 16 years, and they also have a new CEO who is younger and has spent significant time at the company. To me, this combination and a clear direction and focus on the weight loss market tells me that Novo Nordisk made a change in the right direction. The next major bear case for Novo Nordisk is around the deal that was recently made between Trump, Eli Lilly, and Novo Nordisk to slash weight loss drug prices. The bear case is that these slashes in prices will have a huge impact on Novo Nordisk's top and bottom line numbers. Currently, the plan is to drop prices for Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries, as well as drop prices on TrumpRx, a new website planned to launch in 2026. Right now, prices for these drugs are somewhere around $1,300 per month. And this plan calls for the reduction of prices down to around $350 per month in 2026. And then over the next 2 years, dropping prices down to around $250 per month. Looking at these numbers and doing some basic math, we can see that right now, if prices were to go from $1,300 down to around $350, that would result in 25% of the current revenue. And right now, Ozempic as well as Wegovy make up about 65% of total revenue for Novo Nordisk. If we see these drug prices drop significantly, that would result in revenue coming down from around $23.7 billion down to about $6.1 billion. And that would mean that total revenue could drop from around $35 billion down to about $18 billion. So that would be a very significant reduction in top line numbers for the company. So let's go ahead and use the process of inversion on this issue to see how we think that Novo Nordisk could fail. Well, first off, we would have to see this impact all of their prices. I personally don't think this is going to be the case. It appears that it's only going to affect some of the beneficiaries of Medicare and Medicaid, and ultimately a lot of other insurance companies are just going to cover it. So I don't think this is going to impact all of their pricing for these drugs. The other thing is we would have to see the anti-obesity markets really start to stagnate, as well as the diabetes market. If we don't see growth in those markets in the future, then this could cause a big impact on the business. Personally, I don't see that happening either. I think that the obesity market is only going to continue growing within the United States, but also around the world. And then finally, Novo Nordisk would have to fail to innovate. They need to also lower their manufacturing costs to make sure they can stay competitive in pricing, as well as continue to profit from these drugs. And one of the ways the company is trying to become more efficient so that these cuts in prices have less of an effect on the bottom line numbers is by layoffs. Nobody likes to see layoffs, but Novo Nordisk did announce that they are going to be laying off off 9,000 employees, or about 11% of the total company's employees. So while this doesn't help Novo Nordisk's top line numbers, it will improve their profitability, especially while prices drop. However, the biggest issue facing Novo Nordisk is very clearly competition. Their biggest competitor is Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly's diabetes product is known as Mounjaro, with their weight loss product being Zepbound. Zepbound saw their sales increase in the most recent quarter by 185% year over year, with Mounjaro sales increasing 109% year over year. And if we look year to date, Mounjaro has seen an increase of 94% year over year, with Zepbound sales almost tripling in that same time period. For comparison, Novo Nordisk diabetes product Ozempic saw sales increase by only 13% on a constant currency basis in their most recent quarter, with Wegovy, their weight loss product, increasing by 54% year over year. And the very clear next battleground in this space is on the oral application of these weight loss pills. Both Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk have applications set in this space. Novo Nordisk is trying to get approval in the fourth quarter of this year or very early next year. Well, Eli Lilly is set to get approval a few months behind Novo Nordisk. However, Eli Lilly has been pushing to try and get even earlier approval from the FDA. And the competition in this space is very fierce. Eli Lilly's pill is showing results of weight loss between 10 and 20% of body weight, while Novo Nordisk pill is showing weight loss between 20 and 25% of body weight. So right now, it does look like Novo Nordisk is providing a better product, or going to provide a better product when they get to market. However, again, both of these companies are going through trials, and ultimately we will have to see once the final product is released, because the other big factor is side effects. Which company is going to be able to reduce side effects? So when it comes to Novo Nordisk, how do they fail in this market? One important thing to call out is right now it's projected that the weight loss market is going to grow by 18.5% from 2025 through 2030. So this market is a very clearly expanding market that should allow for multiple players to win. But for Novo Nordisk to win specifically, they need to make sure that their products are very competitive in how they actually activate, which it appears that their pill is going to outperform Eli Lilly's, as well as making sure that their consumers have access to these drugs. They need a strategy on direct to consumer, as well as making sure that doctors are recommending their product. If they don't get this right and they don't market to the consumer correctly, then there is a very high chance that they will fail when it comes to the rolling out of new drug applications. That is probably where Novo Nordisk needs to focus most of their attention, is how to get these drugs actually out to the people that need them the most. Eli Lilly is executing at a very high level right now. And because of these high levels of execution, high top line growth, and strong bottom line numbers, investors are willing to pay up for this company. Right now, Eli Lilly is trading at a forward P ratio of a 32.26. But when it comes to Novo Nordisk, investors are pricing it a lot more like Pfizer. Pfizer back in 2021 was at the forefront of the pandemic and releasing vaccines in relation to the pandemic. However, what we have seen since is a major drop in the stock price. It has fallen by almost 60% in just a few years. And this is exactly how Novo Nordisk is being priced. It's being priced like it is a one-trick pony. And because of that, the bear case would say that we should see valuations contract. The forward P ratio right now on Pfizer is sitting at 8.51. This is 30% lower than the current valuation on Novo Nordisk, which is sitting at a forward P ratio of a 12.21. And what bearish investors would argue is that if EPS numbers are sitting at single-digit growth or even negative growth in 2026, we should see valuations contract even further, maybe around an 8 to a 10 forward PE ratio. And that could result in a stock price between $26 and $37 per share. But again, using the thought process of inversion is how do we see these numbers actually come to fruition? Well, first, we need to see Novo Nordisk fail on the execution of their pill. They need to produce a pill that either has more side effects or is not as effective as Eli Lilly's, and the market gravitates towards Eli Lilly's product. We also need to see them really fail to compete with other players. Maybe Pfizer comes into this market with Metsera and they become more competitive. We also see Eli Lilly continue to expand their market share, and overall the company does not realign their business well with this new management team. That's how we start seeing some of these numbers actually come about in 2026 and beyond. If you haven't been following the channel and you watch this video for the first time, you probably are assuming that I am bearish on Novo Nordisk. However, for me personally, I think this company has a bright future ahead of it. The moves that they are making clearly show that the business is aligned on capitalizing on the weight loss market. And that's why I hold this stock in my portfolio. This is the U2 portfolio, and right now it's sitting just under $84,000. And Novo Nordisk is my third largest position in the portfolio. I have 165 shares at a market value of just under $8,000, and I'm down about 7% on this position. I am very bullish on Novo as well as the healthcare industry in general. I also hold shares of United Health Group and Oscar Health because I think in 2026, we're going to see a big turnaround in healthcare, and that will have a big effect on Novo Nordisk as a lot of these health insurance companies will start providing coverage for weight loss drugs. But of course, this is all just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts down below and try and use the power of inversion. What do you believe is the biggest bear case for Novo Nordisk? And if you're bullish on the company, why do you think that bear case is overstated in the current stock price? Let me know that down below. And while you're down there, drop a like on the video and subscribe for more videos like this one. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.